Step into the shadows with Paranormal M, where we unravel the secrets of the otherworldly. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, turn on notifications, and join us on our quest for the unknown. Prepare to be captivated. Ask Reddit. When I was around 10 years old, my grandpa died. That had led me to becoming an anxious wreck for the next couple months to a year. Why? Death. It scared the shit out of me. When you're 10 years old, you don't think about death that much, but unfortunately it led me to think about it for a while. Also, I don't know if this counts as paranormal, but no one ever believes me. I just think it's spooky. After my grandpa died, I started thinking of death more and more. And being the little kid I was scared that I needed to decide if I'd do everything before I die or stay inside so I don't. This led to major anxiety to the point where I went to see a doctor to put me on meds and put me on my way. One night I started seeing what was like a shadowy face cross over my vision, which got worse after a while, so I told my mom. She tells me to take my meds and I should be okay. That night I go to lay down, and the shadowy face keeps passing over my vision. I ignore it and hope that the medicine will work. A couple days pass. Shit just gets worse. I've seen shit in the corner of my eyes. I've been talking to myself, seeing things that aren't there, and just plain old hearing things. One night I was sleeping in our living room on the couch. Turned over toward the back of the couch with my back to the living room. I hear clearly my name being called from behind me, and you can imagine the fear. The kind of fear where you're locked in place and the only thing that's going to make you move is your pure willpower to do so. Of course, I end up turning around at that point, but holy fucking shit. I see something at the last moment run down the hall, and what I thought I saw was like a huge, cat's tail, big around as my arm. I jump up and run to my parents' room, and I'm assuming he means rat's tail. I remember everything so vividly. The mattress on the floor, the dresser's placement, even what TV show was on. I look over to my mother's side of the bed and what looks like a half rat, half man thing sitting on my mom's side of the bed on all fours like a dog. It turns quickly and looks at me. I remember its eyes were bright white. Then it just fades away, literally dematerialized before me. I drop to the ground and scream loud enough to wake my parents, and my mom immediately gets up and hugs me. To this day, I have no idea what in the fuck happened, but after that last instant, everything cleared up. I could have been a paranoid schizophrenic. Or just plumb out of my mind, but I've never had a problem with hallucinations ever since. If anybody's had any explanations, whether it be spiritual or scientific, I wouldn't mind the feedback. Ask Reddit. I had a streak of 3 dreams at my ex-girlfriend's apartment. I was driving the car on the highway. My ex is the passenger. I suddenly slammed the car on the incoming car because I'm mad that we're having this, I suddenly slammed the car on... Well, apparently he slams the car on incoming car because I'm mad and we're having this impossible fight. I wake up, kept the dream for myself, started questioning myself about my mental health. I never had any manifestations of some sorts. Second night, I'm passenger. Same results, same behavior, second morning. Third night, random dude in the car, blonde short hair, blue eyes, metrosexual look. Dude starts saying weird shit that I don't actually remember. Random car, destroy mine. I wake up. Girlfriend at the time and I are going on this camping trip. We pack her shit. Once all the gear's in the car, I asked her if she wants to drive. She says no. I'm scared shitless of turning suddenly psycho and double homicide the both of us. I keep my cool for the whole ride. We camped for a week. We had a great time. We get back at her place and she asked, since we spent a whole week together, I'd like to have a week for myself. I'm like, okay. Starting to have a really weird feeling. We had no sex in this whole camping trip. So do days go by. No answers to my casual text. 4 days, no callback. At the 7th day, I opened the local news website. Main story. A torso found in a suitcase in NDG. The picture featuring this headliner. Her car, her plate, and this is the corner of her apartment block. Got at her place as soon as possible. By running up the staircase of that 4-level block, I've spotted the police ribbons at 204. She's at 404. I get at level 4. Slowly walked at the door. Some sexy time behind that door. Confused, I knock. Sudden dead silence. Knock a minute later. Whispers. She opens, messy hair, messy bed, and a pair of guy's shoes in the hall. It's a 1-room apartment and I'm standing in the middle of the place. I'm asking the guy to leave and he does. She spills the beans. It's been 4 months that she's cheating. We break up and when I walk out I realize that I've caught my girlfriend cheating on me because of a psycho killer in Montreal. She was too busy banging that dude when the cops were calling on her cell to ask her to move her car to the crime scene. Torso was found in the back alley in a suitcase near a dumpster near her car. So the dreams at 404, the murder at 204, the cheating at 404. That is terrible. Texas Demon House. Okay guys, I lived in this house for about 7 years and I have a lot of stories from it, so sorry if this is long. I have ADHD, so I tend to ramble on, but I'm going to keep it chronological and as structured as I can. Let me know if you want part 2. Some background information. This is in a small town in central Texas. The house is a 1-story, 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a front and back living room, a nice-sized backyard with a palm tree, a gazebo, and a shed converted into a bar. It was right across the street from a Catholic church, a cemetery, and after we moved out, we found out the property used to be an orphanage in the 60s. It shut down because before it was a funeral home with a crematorium, and that the orphanage was using to dispose of the bodies of the malnourished or abused children living there. We, being me and my immediate family, we were initially hired to clean up the house after the previous tenants trashed it. And by trashed it, I mean trashed. Carpet, when we cleaned it, it was a light beige color. Started out black. There were human-sized holes in the walls as if somebody was slammed repeatedly all throughout the house. Dead chickens and other small animals were all over the floor, along with black candles, pentagrams on the walls and floors, and some mystery blood smeared on the back of the closet on the master bedroom. Gotta love mystery blood. How'd we feel comfortable enough moving in after all this that we found? Well, when it cleaned up, it was a really nice place, and the rent was only $450 a month. We should have known just based off the low rent. I'd still do it. First instant. It was our first day in the house. I had most of my stuff in already, so my parents told me to wait at the new house while we went to our old house with my siblings to get more stuff. I decided to take a nap after putting a few things on my dresser. In the center of the dresser, I put a Mary candle my mom had given me. It might be important to note that the most satanic stuff was found in the master bedroom that had a walk-in closet, a dressing room, and its own bathroom. This room became my room, because everybody else was too scared to even set foot in it, including my parents. The whole 7 years that we'd lived there, the only time anybody else had, well, but me, set foot in a room was before we moved in while we were cleaning the house. My little brother got the middle bedroom, and my little sister got the room next to his at the end of the hall next to the other bathroom, and my parents opted to turn the back living room into their bedroom. After arranging my stuff in the dresser, I laid on the bed and took a nap. I was waiting for my family to return for more stuff. Not 2 minutes after I shut my eyes, the candle slid off the right side of the dresser to the floor with a thud. I was a little freaked out, but as I was by myself, I tried not to. So I tried rationalizing it, saying it was the wind or my dresser is crooked or slanted. I checked the dresser by pulling it away from the wall a smidge and putting a ball in the center to see if it rolled. It didn't. Then I checked all the doors and windows to make sure that there wasn't a draft or something. Put the candle back in the center, laid back down. Not a minute or so after I shut my eyes, the candle slid off to the left side this time, like somebody was sliding it and fell. I said, nope. Ran outside, waited on the porch till my family got back. When they questioned while I was outside, because it was summer and Texas is hellishly hot in summer, I replied that I wanted some fresh air and sun, trying to play it off so they wouldn't think I was crazy. Second incident. This was after we'd been living there for a few months. I was asleep in my room and the door was open because it made me feel better, and the rest of my immediate family were gathered in my sister's room down the hall telling each other ghost stories. It was close to Halloween. My mom said something along the lines of, "Y'all better stop telling that stuff before something happens." And right after she said that, my door slammed shut and I started screaming. Side note. When I was younger, I used to sleep talk and walk a lot, especially if there's paranormal activity in the house, as this wasn't the last time we lived in a haunted house, unfortunately. My mom urged my stepdad to go check on me, but he just said, "You go fucking check on her." So eventually they both came in to check on me. They said once they opened the door, they saw me sitting up in bed with my eyes open, but glassy, not focused on anything. I kept saying, "Get off me, get me help." They were too scared to enter the room, so from the door they switched on a light and said, "Get out." At that moment, they said a black cloud lifted off of me. I fell back in bed with my eyes closed, fast asleep. They freaking left me there because they were too scared. Told me about it in the morning. I knew they weren't lying because the dream I had the night before matched up with what they were saying. They both looked kind of pale when they were telling me. Scaredy cat jerks, leaving me in there. Yeah. Incident 3. We have a family friend named Donnie Ray. And for some background on him, he's a family friend as long as I can remember. But some would say he was a bit of an odd character. He distrusted cars with a passion, so he rode his bike everywhere, even if it was 30 miles away. He also lived in an abandoned house and used a toilet seat over the bucket. Indeed, Gecko. Since there's no actual toilet, and set up his own irrigation up near a stream to the house so we could have water. He was a kind soul, and we loved him, and loved when he came to visit us. We mostly went to visit him, but sometimes he'd kind of bike the 25 miles himself as a surprise visit. On this particular day, he came in the morning, and by midday, me, my mother, and Donnie Ray were chilling on the front porch while they were drinking mixed drinks. I had my sweet tea. My mom finished her drink and asked Donnie Ray if he wanted another. She was about to go inside and make her another. He said, "Sure, why not?" She went inside. Not 30 seconds later, my mom came from the side of the house with different clothes on, walked up towards us. And what's weird about that is, to come from the side of the house, she would have had to go all the way through the back door and then come all the way around. So what we said was, "What are you doing? I thought you were going to make drinks." She said, "Don't worry about that. We can just talk." She proceeded to talk about death and suffering, kind of in a laughing manner as if she found it enjoyable. We didn't say anything while she talked because we were still wondering how she changed her clothes that fast. Suddenly, in the middle of her talking, she said, "I gotta go," sprinted around the side of the house. Not 30 seconds after that, my mom came back through the front door with 2 drinks in her hand and her original clothes on. We both stared back and she was like, "Why are y'all tripping?" We told her that she had come around the house with different clothes on, talking crazy. She, of course, didn't believe us, thought we were playing a joke on her. We dropped the subject and went back to chilling. How? After a bit, I wanted to go ride my bike. My mom was pretty strict growing up, so the only place I could ride my bike was the church and cemetery parking lot across the street. I begged CaptainTreyD to come with me, since none of my school friends were allowed over, so I wanted the company while he was there. My mom told me no, of course, but he said it was all right, and we set off to ride bikes around the parking lot. That was as far as I could go. After a while, he said, "Hey, baby, I want to show you something in a little bit." I said, "Okay, let's go to the grotto first." We biked down to the grotto behind the church. He sat on a bench there and he asked what the grotto was for. I told him you could pray or just think if you want. We sat in silence for a few minutes till he said, "Follow me." He led me down to the cemetery part and we stopped in front of a grave. He said, "That's my brother right there. He died when he was a young man." I said, "I'm sorry, CaptainTreyD. What was he like?" He told me and then started crying and said, "The angels have been talking to me and they say that he's waiting for me." I asked, "What do you mean?" "I'm gonna die soon, sweetheart. The angels have been telling me for a while now." I said, "Are you sick?" "No, I'm not, and I don't know how I'm gonna die. I just know my time's coming soon." I was like, "No, you're not gonna die, CaptainTreyD. It's okay. It'll be okay. It's okay to be scared." We hugged and stood there in silence for a little bit, then wordlessly we came back to the house. We spent a few more hours, then biked back home. Incident 4. A few months after that weird day, we were about to go to sleep when my stepdad got a call. It was CaptainTreyD's mother telling us that he'd gotten hit by a drunk driver while on his bike. They couldn't even find all of his body parts. That's how hard he got hit. Everybody started crying and freaking out, and suddenly a trash can in the kitchen we were all staring at started shaking. We froze and my stepdad screamed, "Leave now, you're not welcome here." And it stopped. After a few minutes of all of us standing around miserable, we shuffled off to bed and I thought back to what CaptainTreyD had told me, cried into my pillow all night. Rest in peace. Moving into a haunted house. I, a 29-year-old female, am in the final stages of purchasing an old farmhouse. It's a humble 100-year-old house on 157 acres. It's in rural northern Canada. It's a 3-hour move from my current place, which I had to unfortunately leave due to a physically abusive relationship. This area stood out to me as it's relatively close to where my grandparents lived and farmed. It's perfect, and everything I want in a home. Yesterday I had a tour of the property with the current owner who's lived there for the last 10 years. The house has 2 doors, and when I asked why he doesn't use the side door that has a large mudroom, he casually mentioned his daughter in the early 20s is scared of the basement. He kind of joked and said, "What, was there ghosts?" To which he replied, "Yes, actually there is." My next question were, are they good or bad? He reassured me they were good. He then told me he sees a man downstairs sometimes, and occasionally sees him outside walking toward the shop. There's a woman that spends her time in the kitchen when he sees her. He's never seen the children, but he often hears them playing outside. I asked if there was a family tragedy that occurred on the property. He said that the only story he knows of was the original owners who built and homesteaded there pretty much, and they lost a child at a young age. And because it was winter, they had to store him in the cistern in the basement for the winter until the ground thawed. I didn't have any negative feelings in the house. I did feel a sense of comfort, but I've had bad energies in the house previously, so I can't lie and say I'm not a little bit nervous. A good friend of mine is a clairvoyant, and I brought it up to her. She assured me that they're not harmful spirits, and they have attachments to their first home. She said she sensed that they liked me. She went on to say that the current owner advised me of them out of respect for them. There's no disclosure laws of haunted houses where I live, and as long as I live with respect to them, everything will be good. Is there anything I should be mindful of when moving in? Anything I should do? Any kind of smudge or anything I should place in the home? I've heard not to put a mirror facing my bed. I'm just wondering if there's anything else I could do. I don't want to push them away, but I don't want to open myself to anything negative either. This really is a first for me, purposely moving into a place with known entities living in it. I will also say I live alone for the majority. I have dogs and cats and a new boyfriend who seems kind of a little uneasy about this news. However, my mantra the last few months has been, I am capable of anything. I got out of an abusive relationship that should have killed me, and here I am. I've been living my life with a newfound empowerment, so I feel confident I can get through whatever life throws at me. That's a lot of land. Wishing you luck. I lived in a haunted house when I was a child. Has anyone experienced something like this? When I was around 7 or 8, I lived in a haunted house. Not the type of person who believes in many things beyond scientifically proven stuff, but I used to live in a home that had been around for around 60 years. And I truly believed there was something there. My bedroom was upstairs in the middle of the hallway. My brother was down the corner. My parents slept downstairs. Every time I would go to bed, I would always hear whispers directly in my ear, but I could never make out any actual sentences and convinced myself I was just imagining things. However, things got worse as I began to feel blowing on my neck and the feeling of tickling on my head, neck, and back. As time went on, it turned into the sensation of somebody pressing me down, scratching me lightly, but obviously nobody was there. I also used to hear footsteps and see shadowy figures here and there in the middle of the night as I always woke up randomly. I had a difficult time sleeping and staying asleep. I also used to misplace things a lot. Like I'd put something somewhere in my room and then I'd come back and it'd be somewhere else. The energy in my room was so heavy and tense. I don't know how to explain it, but I always avoided being in there. Something about it always gave me physical discomfort and anxiety without reason. Told my parents, and we soon moved out a year or so later. Discussing with my mom a few years later, and she told me that she called a medium without my knowledge. She found that there was apparently a ghost of a woman who was confused and stuck in my floor. I'm glad she'd told me when I got older because I would have been terrified had I known at the time. Once we moved out, I've never experienced anything like it since. The one and only time I've ever done an EVP session, and also the reason I will never participate again. A few weeks ago, my best friend and I were hanging out. We drove to a park to enjoy our lunch. He was telling me about this program and app that he downloaded on his tablet. It supposedly uses frequencies to detect spirits and can decode what is said if they say anything. He said he's had sessions a few times and had success and wanted to know if I was interested in seeing how it works, to see if there's anything to be found at the park. He pulled up the program on his tablet, asked if anybody was around and would be interested in talking. The program picked up a presence, and the word that came across was reference. My friend asked what it meant, and the next word was drafts. My friend asked if a spirit was a writer in life or liked the hobby as writing. Spirit said writer. My friend got excited and asked what kind of things did the spirit like to write. Spirit said removal. Confused, my friend asked what was meant by removal. Spirit said Tom. My friend had asked if the spirit was named Tom or if there was somebody by the name of Tom, and the spirit wanted to talk about it. Spirit said metal. My friend had asked if the spirit meant metal music, and asked what kind of music I'd like to listen to. Now, my friend and I had never asked anything disrespectful or invasive and wasn't in any way trying to upset the spirit. I remained silent the whole time watching the screen and listening to this all go down. The next thing the spirit said was murder. When I saw that word, my heart rate spiked. I mean spiked up high, and it kept rising. I didn't feel okay, and it felt like an electrical bolt went through my body. It was the weirdest sensation. And I told my friend that we needed to go now and to the hospital. I'm in my 30s without any heart problems or blood pressure problems, so this was alarming to me, and pretty out of the ordinary, especially because everything was normal before the spirit said murder. As we peel out of the parking lot heading toward the hospital, I begin to feel better, and the further we get away from that park and whatever that was that we contacted. We pulled into the hospital lot. I was back to normal. Felt jittery a bit from the, electrical shock sensation that went through my body, and out of it from being worn from the major heart rate increase. After sitting another few minutes, I was completely fine, like nothing had happened. Whatever that thing was decided to come after me, and I didn't even do anything. I'd asked my friend if he felt anything, and he said no. After the spirit had said murder, my friend even went silent and said, oh, because he didn't know really what to say at that point. I don't know why it came after me or what even happened back there, but I'm not interested in doing that ever again. I'm afraid if I ever do another session, that same thing will happen or worse. But if something were to happen to another person, I can't bear to think if something happened to my friend or anyone else. Has this happened to anyone else? Any idea on what might have come after me? My sixth sense is that, while I've never seen any proof of any of these phone apps, especially when it comes to audio having any legitimacy. That coming from an audio technician standpoint, anyway. Haunting experiences in our first rental home. Back in 2007, my wife and her 2 young children moved into our first house that we rented. It had sat empty for about 5 or so years. It was built in 1902. It was so old that the main beam in the Michigan basement was a tree log. That's where the builder carved into it and put in cross beams. Went over one day to open it up and do a deep clean before moving in. Our landlord said that he'd be dropping by to drop off rental agreements that we signed. I was on the main floor when I heard footsteps coming from upstairs. Called out his name, but I got no response. The footsteps stopped. I went upstairs and heard and felt the closet door shut. That was in our soon-to-be daughter's room. I opened the door and there was no one. So I went back down and explained that we were a young family and that we mean no harm. I gave a cautious warning that if it were to hurt my family, I would do everything possible to remove whatever was here. Big mistake. About 3 months into living there, we went away for the weekend. Upon coming home, I was carrying our daughter upstairs and my wife bringing up her infant son. I opened her bedroom door and a black cat was sitting on her bed. Ran past us, scaring my wife. I was able to chase it to the patio where my wife shut the door behind us. It had ran behind her stroller, so I opened the outside door and she moved the stroller. No cat. We searched her house for over 2 hours after that. Still no cat. About 2 months after that, I was in our dining room on the computer. That's when I felt a cold chill. Suddenly, my wife let out a scream, and the door to the basement slammed shut. I immediately ran to see her. When I entered the room, she was so pissed at me, asking, "How and why did you do that?" I asked, "What's wrong?" My wife replied, "You opened the basement door, peeked your head out at me, and gave me an evil smile." We both sat in silence, realizing that the only entrance to the basement was right in front of us. We moved out a month later. Good move. 2 recent experiences. I had my first paranormal encounter in March of last year. I was 8 months pregnant with my daughter when me and my husband and some of our good friends went on a trip away. Ended up at an old asylum night tour. Now, I'm somebody who always wanted to believe in spirits and all that stuff. I've always wanted to have an experience myself. I was taking photos all throughout the tour, hoping to capture something. Didn't have any luck. When we were about halfway through the tour, the guide pulled me aside and said that this next area is where the male patients were kept, and that they've been known to gravitate to pregnant women. So if I'm feeling uncomfortable, I can leave at any point. I brushed it off like, yep, no worries. I was actually a bit excited. Went into a part of this building and we had to turn off all of our torches. Within seconds, something grabbed my arm. I spin around thinking somebody in our group did it as a joke, but no one was there. I turned to my husband and this rush of emotion came over me, like panic, anxiety, and sadness. I burst into tears and had a full-blown panic attack. I couldn't breathe. The guide had to escort me out of the building. I rejoined the tour and went into another area. Same thing. Lights went off and something was brushing against my cheek and my leg. But no emotions associated with it. I just waited for the lights to come back on and told my husband I wanted to get out. I had nightmares and still feel so uneasy about the feelings with that first experience. The second experience happened last night. I was at my mom's house bathing my daughter, as I'd done many times before. I was in the bathroom with my little girl waiting for their massive spa to fill. And I sat on the edge of the tub. As I was sitting, I felt a pressure like a jolt of electricity about halfway down the center of my back. I heard an audible gasp right next to my ear. Mind you, nothing was there except a wall about 60 centimeters away. Once again, I felt panicky, hot and clammy. I got instant goosebumps all over my body. Looked down at my daughter, who didn't look like she had noticed anything. Tried to lean up against things to reenact the feeling and sound, but there's no explanation. I felt a tingling electricity in the one spot on my back for hours after. Went straight out and asked my mom if she had seen anything like that happen in the house, but she hadn't. Something sinister lived in my house. Now that that's out of the way, I will build some background. So I had a roommate named Adrienne Michaels. You can look her up if you'd like. We were very close friends. She needed a place to live, so we moved in together. I was pregnant and we celebrated every aspect of my pregnancy together. She made an appointment to freeze her eggs because she was in her late 20s. She didn't believe her eggs would be good by the time she was ready to have a baby. I'm giving these details so you can see the situations that we found ourselves in. A few days after my due date, her service cat alerted me I was going to be sick. Sure enough, I was. Went to the doctor just to be safe. For reasons I won't get into, at least on this post, they illegally held me there and coerced me into having an unnecessary C-section, which was my greatest fear. 3 weeks later, I was in a spiral of depression, unable to do my usual tasks. I usually cooked and cleaned for her. She spiraled into her ED and lost a lot of weight very quickly. And she quit exercising. Another thing I won't talk about in detail on this post, but may detail later. She had a very bad day, and that's the night she died. So after, we had to move. Our first day looking, we found a 2-bedroom house on the lake for $750 a month. Similar houses were going for $1,400 plus at the time, so we felt extremely blessed. We were the only applicants, and the owner said his wife couldn't handle living in the house but wouldn't explain why. So we moved in. Without a few days, the place started feeling unsafe. We felt like we were being watched. The place really obviously wasn't under surveillance, but it felt like a spiritual thing. I've always been kind of sensitive to spirits, and here was no exception. It started pretty benign, like feeling like I wasn't alone in the kitchen, the laundry room. That was fine. We just figured maybe Adrienne was stopping by. I would never talk to her, or rather I would talk to her sometimes and tell her I'd miss her. But then the dreams started. Pretty standard dreams usually. Feeling like my daughter was in danger. Feeling like I was falling. Seeing shadows in my lucid dreams. But I had a dream about Adrian. She was sitting drinking tea, and after a tearful reunion, she told me that it wasn't safe to be where she was. She had to leave. Something kept lurking in the shadows. She told me not to look for it, because it's going to cause me even greater pain. When I woke up, my baby was screaming in her crib. There were really huge ants all over. She'd been bitten a few times, and it was winter. There were no ants in the house that we knew of. We kept the place really clean. Put out ant poison, but we never figured out where they came from. Never saw them again. They vanished. My chinchillas would bark a lot. They'd normally been quiet. Soon after I was cleaning, I found what looked like a bloody handprint in the closet. I took photos, but they were in my old computer, which I can't turn on anymore. The handprint was very clearly that of a child. When we moved in, I put all of Adrian's stuff in the spare room and I never went in there. Her parents took only her photos and her cat, so we had the rest of her life in this room. I was organizing the room when I opened the closet. I saw an attic bolted shut and painted over. I could see it hadn't been opened since it had been repainted, but in the back corner of the closet was a tiny chair built in. I got spooked immediately by something falling off the table in the other room. So I went out and took care of that, shut the door and didn't go back in there. And that night was the first night I saw something. My husband was in the bedroom changing the baby. We were talking. The kitchen has a view into the laundry room. I saw him in there and was talking to him. I went into the bedroom to put something away to find that he was actually in there. I was extremely unsettled by this because I'd never seen anything pretend to be someone I loved. But after this experience, I had my very religious mother go through with some church friends and bless the place. It still felt like I was being watched, but I was able to ignore it now. By the time my baby started walking, I spiraled again into depression. I always kept the blinds closed and lived in the dark. Seldom did I even have the TV on. My husband worked 12-hour shifts, 5 days a week to keep up with the bills and things. My mom was over a lot, but I quit cleaning and I can't remember a lot of it, honestly. I felt immense guilt that my roommate died because I couldn't be better for her, which rationally I know isn't correct, but I really messed up during this time. It was deep winter when I felt this extreme chill, like all the doors were suddenly open at once. My scented candle flickered and almost went out, but I couldn't move. I was holding my sleeping baby, and out of the corner of my eye I saw something crawling on the floor. It was large like a man, but the proportions were off and his arms were way too long. It was walking towards us, and everything in me was screaming not to look at it. I could see it coming toward me, but the entryway door opened and my husband came home early to surprise me with dinner. I told him about it later, and I could think about it. I saw the figure several more times. There's nothing we could do, or at least didn't end for a few more months. So we sucked it up and dealt with the fear. I looked into the history of the house, and one of the people who lived there was a police chief. They were jailed for abusing his daughter. It was a trap house at one point, too. Somebody had been killed nearby. There's probably a lot of experiences I had in that house that I shut out of my mind. But this is everything that really stands out to me now. The house felt suffocating at times, and like I was being pushed out. The landlord had a second house available for only $450 a month, so we moved out the day after we found out about the other rental place. No one stays living there long. Most people have stayed about 4 months before they leave. Since the events of this story, my life has improved incredibly. I haven't had a single bout of depression since living there, and I have 3 children who are all very happy and healthy. My oldest sees ghosts and has a past life memory. She tells me about it often, but I'll save that for a future post. I've been meaning to write this for over 6 years now. If you read it all, thank you. You're welcome. I appreciate getting it off my chest. It's been a long journey. Ask Reddit. I have several paranormal stories, as the women in my family are particularly sensitive to the other side. I grew up in a haunted house where the activity centered particularly around my bedroom. I would awake in the middle of the night to hear sounds of pages fluttering. Think what it would sound like if you dropped a large bucket filled with books off of a tall building. That's what it sounded like. I would always investigate, but was never able to find the source of this sound. The story I'd like to tell here, however, pertains to the house my boyfriend and I went to view as we went to the market to buy. While the house was a dream come true, something felt utterly wrong there. I kept these things to myself as we progressed through each room, but somehow I just couldn't shake the feeling that there was a sinister presence in that house. After feeling so overwhelmed by this negative energy, I told my boyfriend that we couldn't live there because I felt an overwhelming darkness. It was as if there were several unhappy spirits in every room. Imagine an unknown source making the air so thick you feel like you're trudging through a dense forest in the middle of the night. I was consumed with this feeling. My boyfriend, who's not really a believer in the paranormal, just kind of brushed it off and we left. Unable to shake the feeling, I did some research on the property. I was so sure something dark was living there, and upon a quick Google search, it turns out that the house actually used to be the town morgue. When it was sold, the builder remodeled the entire thing into a home before putting it up for sale. My boyfriend was shocked and couldn't explain away the coincidence. The morgue was where the dead would go after their final breaths. I can only assume that some of them died by violence. That was the first time that my sensitivity to the paranormal actually had some facts to back it up. My friend and I encountered someone or something at camp. To give context, I'm from a small country in South America. I attended a religious school. This was every year. You'd go to some sort of a spiritual getaway in a camp situated in an open field next to a small river, in this sort of forested mountain area. Said place is beautiful, but gives a kind of an off vibe, like it's lost in time due to its very old structures. Because of this, the place has been shrouded in mysteries and horror stories. It doesn't help that the whole town was once burned to the ground in a very gruesome war that almost wiped my country off the map in the 1800s. So here's what happened. It was my last year in school, our last camp. After a long day of all my classes, I was tired from hiking. The forest next to the camp was like after dinner. Short stay at a campfire, we were sent to bed. My class was made mostly up of women. We were very few men. Only 6, including me, so we had the whole dorm hall for us. This dorm, which was housing only for 6 teens, was a long hall full of bunks made for at least 40 people. Since we didn't have to really share, we all chose top bunks next to each other. 3 on my side, including me, and 3 in the room facing me. It was about midnight. We would just lie there talking, joking, and laughing in the dark since the lights were out. After a couple of minutes, I fell asleep. I woke up at what I would assume was between 2 and 3 a.m. I rose my head from the sheets to see my best friend in his bunk in front of me also raising his head. He nods jokingly to the bunk next to him where another classmate was sleeping. When I turn, I see a silhouette of my classmate just standing, staring at his bed. I laugh quietly and nod to my friend as to play a prank on him. Then before we could act, I see the silhouette crouch and notice that my classmate was fully asleep in his bed. Almost at the same time, my friend and I react and look at each other wide-eyed. Both of us cover ourselves in sheets, doing our best to fall asleep. Somehow we managed to do so. The next morning I went straight to my friend, and before I could finish asking if he saw it, he just interrupted with a big yes. Told me exactly what he saw. It was the same thing. We approached this classmate and explained it to him, and of course he thought we were just joking. Both me and my friend remember that event to this day, talking about it every now and then, almost 7 or 8 years after it happened. Oak Alley Plantation. In May of 2013, I went on a tour to Oak Valley Plantation in Louisiana. It was late in the day and we were the next on the last tour. At the start of the tour, our guide mentioned that the house was in its original condition, except for a few replaced window panes. After we toured the upstairs, he went out some French doors onto the upper wraparound porch. I hung back as my group went around the corner so I could take a couple of pictures of the Oak Alley. When I went to catch up with my group, I was walking along the porch and I noticed a window that had different types of glass panes. Remembering that the guide had said I stopped to examine the glass. As I was standing there looking at the window, the sheer curtain on the inside moved, like somebody had run their hand across the curtain. I immediately went back to the house to see if I could see anything in the room that might have caused the curtain to move. But the window I had been looking at was in the closed room between the two open bedrooms. I heard the final tour group starting to come up the stairs, so I went back to my group. The tour was over at that point, so I asked the guide what was in that closed room. She said it was a small room that the guides used to change clothes in. I asked if there were other guides working, and she said it was only her and the guide who had been downstairs with the last tour. I asked if there was a fan in the room. She said there wasn't. I asked if she could think of anything that might have caused the curtain to move, and she couldn't. Ask Reddit. This one needs a little backstory. When I was about 14 or 15, I'm 20 now, I was living with my grandparents, my mom, my younger sister, and my great-grandmother. I would stay up later than everyone else on the weekends and holiday watching TV while sitting on the floor of the lounge room. From where I was sitting, I could see up the hall to the first door to the hallway. This belonged to my great-grandmother. About every month or so, she would walk out of her room, look at me, and chastise me for being up so late. This was usually around 11 p.m. A week after she died, I sat in the lounge room. It was my usual spot watching TV late at night. That's when somebody walked out of her bedroom. Since I knew no one was sleeping in that room, I looked up and saw her staring at me from the hallway. She asked me, "Does your mother know you're up this late?" before shuffling off to the bathroom. When I finally got up the nerve to go to my bedroom, I had to walk past her room and the bathroom to get there. The tap had been turned on. She always forgot to turn it off. About a year later, my older sister moved into that room with her boyfriend. And aside from a few odd happenings, they had no serious encounters. Until one night they left their lava lamp turned on. They both awoke to a loud smash as the lava lamp hit the wall on the opposite side of the room. It had been yanked from the wall and thrown. We are certain of this, because of the distance and the fact that the alarm clock and keys in front of the lamp hadn't moved at all. My older sister moved from this room within a year. My younger sister moved into it. She placed posters on the wall and kept the room relatively clean. However, if I were to enter her room with or without permission, once I'd left and closed the door, her posters would get torn from the walls and her ornaments thrown to the ground. Needless to say, I rarely entered that room afterwards. 2 years ago, just after I moved out, my older sister moved back into the house. But a different room, as my younger sister still occupied that one, placed her child in another room as well. A few months into living there, my nephew began telling tales of men who'd walk into his room and play with his toys. At first, my sister thought nothing of it, until my nephew would no longer play with his toys as the bad men played with them. She and her children then moved into the granny flat behind the house. Had no problems since. However, my second eldest sister moved into this house around the time my other sister moved into the granny flat. This sister also stayed in a different room, but she stayed in what used to be a sunroom, but had been converted to a large bedroom. She turned on her pedestal fan each night to cool herself down, and she woke night after night to find it turned off and moved to the other side of the room. She believed it was her husband and told him to stop. However, this continued. One night she woke and found and turned off, and she rolled over to wake her husband to tell him off for turning off the fan, and it began to slide across the floor. She stared at it, saw no one beside it. She checked to make sure her husband was in fact beside her in the bed. Of course he was. She turned on the lamp beside her and the sliding stopped. I know you only asked for one story, but I thought I'd share just a few of the paranormal occurrences I've experienced. Apologize for the mass amount of text, but the things listed here barely even scratch the surface of the things experienced by myself and my sisters, not only in that house, but in others as well. Was it a ghost? I just want to start by saying I don't believe in ghosts. That being said, I work the night shift, so I'm up at night all the time, even on my days off. I'm also a horror nut. I love a good scare, but I know it's all BS. About 1 week ago, I was home alone playing games one night. That's when it started storming. My daughter's scared of thunder, so I got off the game and brought her to bed with her mom. I decided to watch TV in the living room until I was ready for bed. Turned off the lights and turned on #body problem. It was around 5:30 a.m. when I first heard noise behind me. I looked back expecting my daughter or dog, but there was nothing. I ignored it and continued watching TV in the dark. About 10 minutes later, I felt something grab my ankle, almost like a small dog or cat trying to play. Shook my foot and looked down, expecting my wiener dog, but there was nothing. Got up and turned on the light, not quite scared, but confused. I looked around and didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Found my dog asleep in bed with my daughter and her mom. I watched TV with the lights on for about 20 minutes. Nothing happened. I turned off the light, settled back in. About 5 minutes in, I felt something touch my head. I turn around calmly and see nothing. Get up and turn the light back on, sit back down and watch TV. 20 minutes later and nothing. Turn the light off again. 5 minutes later, I feel something touch my head again. This continues about 3 more cycles until I quit. Stood in my living room and stared into all the shadows trying to see anything. I didn't in fact see anything, and since then, I've noticed more unexplained sounds in the house. Extremely vivid dream. So for context, I've always been extremely sensitive to spirits and other supernatural, for back of the letter term, happenings. But this situation shook me to my core. I'm pretty certain it's going to be my Roman Empire of cold cases. Last night I had a dream that I was hanging out with a girl named Haley and another man. We were driving around and went out to lunch. She and I were apparently close friends, so much so that we were planning a trip to Germany. She was blonde, very pretty, taller than me. I'm 5'1". The man spoke occasionally, but his face was very blurry. Could never quite make out what he was saying. Anyways, at one point we make a stop at a gas station that looks like it's in the middle of nowhere. When I ask the attendant where we are, he says, "Oh, we're in Mississippi near Buren." And being from Texas, I was very confused, but fast forward. We're standing at the drink station. There's a big TV next to the machines, and I see Haley's face on it with a body found, but the name is jumbled. I look at her and I'm like, "Haley, are you dead?" She just laughs and goes, "You're so silly." Told her to look at the screen, she wouldn't. She just ignored it. Then I hear this voice, my voice. It's telling me to wake up over and over until I finally did. When I woke up, I grabbed my phone and searched Buren, Mississippi. There's a ghost town called Van Buren. Then I searched Haley dead Mississippi, trying to convince myself that it was just a very weird dream and I'm wrong. First result is Haley Silas, cold case that I'd never seen in the news or heard until today. She apparently called 911 from a gas station day before she got killed, and that was 2 hours from Van Buren, and there's a massive national forest in between. I don't know what to do with this. I don't know if there's anything I can do with this. I'm trying to find more information online, but the fact that the police don't seem to care and a strange man had her phone and it was answering it after she died, nothing's adding up. Maybe I'm crazy, but I swear I never saw anything about her until today. I've never even heard of Van Buren. I'm sorry, Haley. You didn't deserve what happened to you. I'll pray for you. You never told me if she matched the description in your dream, and I want to know. So I think I'm haunted. So I'm reading on my phone. It's like 11 p.m. I feel something hop onto my bed. Not unusual, my cat does it all the time. I reach out to pet her and there's nothing there. Suddenly my hand feels significantly colder. I'm like, alright, probably just my imagination. Turn on my side and continue reading and feel the same cold on my bicep. I say, but out loud, well, that's not ominous. I hear a faint no in the back of my head. Close my eyes, and you know how you can tell if there's a light in front of your eyes when it's closed? It was there, but it was like something in between me and the light. It was around the edges of my vision. I then say, well, I guess I'm haunted now. Then in the same voice and tone in the back of my head, I hear friend. I then proceed to feel that cold on my arm from time to time for like an hour and hear slow or done when I was scrolling through the story. Or maybe I was reading too slow. Positive experience for years. I've always been linked somewhat to the spiritual world. Ever since I was a child, I had dreams of deceased loved ones. People I've never met. Stuff happening in my room. Someone talking to me but being alone. So I was always open and did my research since learning how to read. It always felt like I was a magnet of some sort of stuff like that. After I met my husband, I learned he also is linked to the spiritual world, but only through his deceased grandpa, who wasn't with us anymore for 13 years at the time I met my husband. He didn't indulge further in it, but he is a believer. Over the years, I heard stories about this grandpa, a great man, but I only ever knew his nickname, never his full name. We couldn't visit his grave, so I didn't see his name there either, which will be relevant. We had so much encounters throughout the years, all harmless. Just like somebody saying, hello, I'm here, only to be gone after. Sometimes they would stay and mess with stuff, but left after being told to go. So nothing special, really. Then we hit a rough patch in our marriage, and coincidentally my brother-in-law had to move in with us for a few months. He was bad news all around, but I only learned that after everything and my husband didn't know either. After staying with us for a week, stuff happened. Bad stuff. Kid being too scared to go in any room alone, screaming whenever it got a little bit darker, dreaming bad dreams, electronics acting up. But still, I didn't see or feel anything. I was at a complete loss what was happening. I never had an experience like that. So, one day at a dinner, calm washed over me, familiar feeling with someone present. Then my little one looked up, way too far up for anybody standing there, and laughed, saying grandpa. When asked, they said their grandpa was just somebody old enough to be a grandpa with white hair and glasses. At that point in time, we didn't know who it could be, and I didn't know how my hubby's grandpa looked like. This didn't even ring any bells. About half an hour later, my brother-in-law just came home and started eating. My little one looked up again, screamed at the top of their lungs, and then we heard it. 3 short knocks against a metal bowl in my KitchenAid on the top of the hanging cabinets. It mocked the Holy Trinity. We looked at each other and didn't know what to do, and then, because it wasn't acknowledged, my KitchenAid was moved. Those things are heavy, and we have suction cups at the bottom so they can't move without a little bit of force. We noped out of there as fast as we could. My hubby and I later returned without L.O. and B.I.L., brother-in-law. What is L.O.? As soon as we entered, I somehow saw a name in my head that I didn't know. Couldn't link to a nickname. Hadn't ever seen it written like that. I also saw a face I didn't recognize, but I felt calm again. So I knew whoever it was meant no harm. There was also a distinct smell in the air. My husband could smell it also. I later learned that he knew that smell, but couldn't place it, so he didn't think much of it at the time. We packed stuff and went to my in-laws. There I saw a picture of my husband's grandpa for the first time, and it clicked. He wanted me to know that he was watching and trying to protect us. Talked to my husband about it, and we decided to contact him as safe as possible. It was a hassle, but we managed it. And while he didn't interact much with my husband, I think he was upset with him at that point in time. He did with me, like full-on touching and relaying messages in my head and messing with a candle that ruined my favorite jeans. I told my husband about the unique way his name was written, his face, everything, and he confirmed it, so we know for sure. We learned the negativity entity was bound to my brother-in-law, and he tried protecting us but couldn't do much as it fed off of my brother-in-law's negative energy. We dealt with everything accordingly, and we were safe again. But every now and then my hubby's grandpa lets us know he's here, watching and protecting, seemingly even joining in celebrations. He also let me know I was pregnant with my second before I even had symptoms. It was through a vivid dream. That man is stubborn as hell. Seems to insist to stay close. It's also nice knowing he has our backs. It's not every day, more like once every month that he lets us know he's still here. We don't want to basically evict him from our lives if he doesn't mess with us, so we let him and others be as long as no one comes near our children, which for now no one did. My dad came to see me when he passed. I'm now a 32-year-old male, a son in a family of 4, mom, dad, older brother, 39, myself. Dad was a hard-ass growing up, tough guy. Men needed to do manly stuff, play sports, etc., and needless to say, that blew up in his face with me turning out to be gay. Came out to the family when I was 23. To my surprise, he was supportive and had my back. Though through life, Dad had a bit of a drinking problem. He'd become violent verbally and physically abusive. At the time, I was too young to understand, but also not really able to do very much. 2007, Mom decided it was time to divorce. Given the struggle she's endured, I fully supported her, as well as my brother. That being said, the news didn't go down well with my dad, ending up with me holding him against a wall with my arm pushed up to his throat. That day, he moved out. With the divorce proceeding, Mom started telling us a lot of the scary things she's had to go through, and things that we weren't aware of as kids. At least I wasn't aware of. From my dad threatening her, forcing to abort a pregnancy, as well as some other scary things. Now, I have a pretty solid head on my shoulders. I know right from wrong, and I'm no fool to people who try to pull the wool over my eyes. I wouldn't say I picked sides during the divorce, but I can admit that I, for lack of a better term, disowned my dad after this. He'd try to call me on my birthday and Christmas, and I'd straight up ignore his calls, which, looking back, has left me with some guilt and some regrets. When I was 29, this was 3 years ago during my first week of living on my own. It was a Wednesday evening, doing my usual thing, either gaming or watching series or movies or just relaxing. I fell asleep and had a dream of my dad. Now, generally, my dreams of him would entail a lot of anger, animosity, and arguments between him and myself. But this time it was different, and it would be a few days until I understood why. This time I felt at peace, at ease, I was calm. He was calm, and there were no words. Kinda just the head nod you'd give someone in passing, but it felt a little bit more than that. I woke up feeling a little confused, but pretty quickly brushed it off and carried on with things. A few days later, Saturday, I'm driving to grab some lunch and my brother calls me. I answer and he tells me that they've just found my dad and he's gone. My exact response was, "Oh, okay." When the coroner came to collect the body, they said he'd most likely been gone for a few days. He lived in a separate entrance at a friend's place. Wednesday was the last anybody had seen or spoken to him. With this, as well as the dream I had, I'm certain that he passed the Wednesday evening that he came to say goodbye. Looking back, the dream and how it felt, it was almost like he wanted me not to put too much guilt on myself for how our relationship turned out, and he was accepting and forgave me. It's been a few years, and I still have a lot to unpack with my feelings and guilt around how I treated him, but I wish I could tell him or let him know that I forgive him too. If anybody heard that ding, the dinner I prepared is ready. See ya.